Hi, and welcome to another edition of NAIC Insights. I'm your host, Bob Greene, and I am delighted to be joined today by Kneeland Youngblood of the Pharos Capital Group. Welcome, Kneeland.
It's a pleasure to be here, Bob.
Well, I've been excited about this interview for a while. I appreciate you being willing to share your story and your background with us today. So why don't we jump right in? Tell us about the Pharos Capital Group, assets under management, investment strategy. Introduce us to the group.
So Pharos Capital, I'm chairman, CEO, founding partner, majority owner of Pharos Capital Group. We're a healthcare-focused alternative investment manager. It really seeks to improve patient outcomes, lower the cost of healthcare, and create greater access for patients. So a very patient-centric approach to healthcare. In addition, we underwrite using what we call the social determinants of healthcare. Somebody may have high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, but what's the housing, what's the employment, what's the transportation? All those things factor into someone's underlying condition. And so really, we are very focused on underserved communities because that's where the greatest disparities in healthcare are. And so if you took our last fund, Fund 3, which was $545 million, 11 platform companies we invested in, average multiple of 8.3, 81 tuck-in acquisitions, average multiple of 3.6, so a buy and build strategy. And within those portfolio companies, over 6,000 employees, 78% of whom are women, most of whom are people of color. And 85% of the patients we take care of are either on Medicaid, the poor, or Medicare, the elderly, in urban but also in rural communities across the U.S. with the greatest disparities in healthcare. And while, yes, we have a tremendous impact in those communities, which is purposeful, it also is where we can generate the best risk-adjusted returns. Because in value-based care, which is only about 7% of the healthcare landscape, but that's $300 billion in really the growth engine of healthcare. It's where we can, again, generate great returns, but help people who need it the most. And so that's really what we do.
That's outstanding. Kneeland, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of our members, some that are doing software, others that are doing, consumer retail and variety. But you're actually the first healthcare investor I've had a chance to speak to. And it's not lost on me that as a person of color who also has a background in medicine, this is another way for you to impact change in our community. Talk to us about this notion of generating better patient outcomes. What types of things go into that? What do some of your portfolio companies do?
First off, as you're aware, Bob, and we can go into this a little bit later, once upon a time, I used to practice medicine, which I did for 12 years, emergency medicine. And what I found was that oftentimes I was stitching people up and then sending them back in the same environments only to see them rotate back again and again and again because of the challenging environment that they were in. And so for me, being able to invest in the space to kind of take a step back and be able to provide, over 6,000 jobs with health insurance, with 401k, you can have an impact in people's lives in lots of different ways. I certainly was doing it as a clinician, but in this way, I think, extend it and have an even greater impact in not only the people who I employ, but also in the patients that we take care of. And so if you look at the types of companies we're invested in, we have a company that focuses on housing the homeless. So again, United Healthcare did a study, said what are our most expensive patients, stage 4 cancer, end-stage kidney disease. They had not anticipated the homeless population. Mm-hmm. United Healthcare, believe it or not, was spending $250,000 per year per patient, an astronomical amount. How could that be? Because these patients show up in the emergency department in a police or an ambulance, the most expensive entree in the health system, but it's the only entree to the health system that they cannot be denied care. But it's 35 times more expensive than an office visit. So they get to the ER, they got mental health problems, physical health problems, they get admitted to the hospital, it takes 3 or 4 weeks to get them stabilized, and oftentimes, particularly in winter months, they can't discharge them because shelter beds are full. And again, you cannot, by law in the United States, discharge somebody to the street. So it either has to be a shelter bed or a family member, a loved one, or what have you. And I talked to the dean of Howard University Medical Center here in DC. He said they had one patient in the hospital for 3 years for non-medical reasons because they couldn't discharge him.
Wow.
These patients get hoteled in hospitals because they can't put them anywhere. So anyway, we took an entrepreneur who was at United Healthcare. We took the corporate person at United Healthcare, found a platform company that was providing mental health services for the homeless, that was providing housing for the homeless, and we bought him out. He rolled over equity, and what did we do? We said we're going to provide mental health services in the home. We're going to provide primary care services in the home. We're going to provide housing. We're going to provide 3 meals a day. We're going to provide all the medications. We're going to provide job training, provide online education. We're going to provide transportation to and from wherever the homeless want to go. And we go to state Medicaid, who administers insurance for the poor. We say, whatever you did for this person, whatever you paid for this person last year, we'll do it for half.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. They're like remarkable. They send us all the sickest, most challenging people. And what happens? Emergency department visits go down 85% the first year, 92% the second year. The state of Michigan saves over $100 million in each calendar year. And we go from, 17 homes to 166 homes, from housing 100 homeless, close to 2,000 homeless, from, let's just say we more than 10x our EBITDA, and we sell it for a commanding multiple. Yeah. But it's a way we can impact communities, because in 90 days, 20% of those people are no longer homeless. They get reintegrated back in the communities. But within 2 years, 50% get reintegrated back in the communities, back in their families, and no longer homeless. So it's an opportunity to do well and do very, very good.
That's outstanding. Whenever people talk about you, and when I first met you almost 20 years ago, people fixate on this notion of you being a doctor, right? And it's certainly an impressive credential, and it more goes into that than I think any of us would ever appreciate. But you invariably get this twisted question, Kneeland, of, well, you were a doctor and now you're a financier, and wow, that could be so different. But as I prepared for this interview, Kneeland, I actually thought to myself, you couldn't have a better background for the investment strategy that you're executing, right? I mean, you're living in a hospital environment. The front line for that environment is the emergency room, which unfortunately is the primary care physician for most people in need, people that are underserved, and people who happen to be people of color in many cases. So here you are with a full medical training credential set, 12 years of ER experience. You've seen the patients. I would say if things have changed, they've gotten worse in the system, not better, right? So talk to us a little bit, maybe from a newer perspective, about how that training and how that experience gives you the insights to be a better investor.
Mm-hmm. First off, it puts things in perspective. Look, being an investor, making money is important, but it's not life and death. Mm-hmm. And having had to make those decisions and confront life and death on a fairly regular basis, it really puts things in perspective. And so that's number one. I think in order to be certainly in the emergency department, which is where I worked, for 12 years, you need to be calm. You need to prioritize things that are important. You need to also be prepared to cut your losses and move forward, because look, this person's going to die anyway. You got to move on to the next person who you has the best chance of living. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of, it's excellent training for being grounded in the realities of life, understanding that when people come in the emergency department, it doesn't matter that they're the CEO of some company, that they're a billionaire or a trillionaire or whatever. They got the same heart attack. They've got the same loss of a loved one. They've got the same, it doesn't matter. And so it really helps you to be able to relate to people in very challenging situations, but provide comfort and empathy to people. And a lot of what we do as investors is certainly working with management teams, helping them to work through challenges, trying to provide a calm environment, methodical way of addressing certain issues, recognizing, loss mitigation and risk. And so being able to assess those things. And so it is, to your point, Bob, an excellent training with regard to the mental acuity and stamina necessary to be, I think, an excellent, investor. And so it's not without its challenges. Certainly, being a physician, there are enough docs who are not particularly good at business, and we know that. In fact, there's an expression: there are deals, and then there are doctor deals. But I was fortunate to have great mentors, a great team, and exposure outside of the clinical practice of medicine that really helped me to make my clinical experience complement my business acumen.
So, Kneeland, one of the things that you've talked to me about over the years is the evolution of your business and the things that you have to focus on that you perhaps didn't see immediately and obviously. But one of the things you did from the very beginning is identify partners that brought complementary skill sets and yet common culture to what you wanted to do when creating Pharaohs. Talk about the early days, the identification and the early collaboration with your partners, and how you all intentionally built the firm that you have today.
Thanks, Bob. And it was not without its share of challenges. When you're starting out a business, you have great optimism, great dreams of what you want to build. But for me, I knew that I needed people who had very good discipline within the analytics of investing, and also with regard to experience and exposure on Wall Street. And so as it happened, I consciously went out in the marketplace to try to find great partners, because I knew what I knew what my skill set was, but I needed to complement that with folks. And so as it happened, my co-founder and chief investment officer went to Princeton, much younger than I, finished summa cum laude, #1 in his class in economics, worked at Goldman Sachs. And, he was an important pillar with regard to complementing who I was and what I was about, sharing my values and really wanting to build a firm in a way that made sense. As it happened, we were joined by a couple of other partners initially. Those things didn't necessarily work out as well, but you learn. And in our case, while we may have initially been more VC investors and more generalists as opposed to subsector experts, we recognized healthcare was what we did best, and so we focused on that. And we've been able to build a firm, and now we have 5 partners in the firm, and have certainly understood what we're the very best at, what we're not good at, and then build on that we're good at.
So, Kneeland, it's also very evident that you have given yourself experiences beyond the deal side and beyond even your medical training that have prepared you for this journey. You, like I, had an opportunity to be a fiduciary, to sit as a trustee on a large pension system. And yet those relationships tie very handily into ultimately what we do in the business, which is identify LPs and manage capital on their behalf. Talk a little bit about that point of your career, that journey, being a trustee and really helping the people of Texas teachers retirement system grow their assets under management.
Yeah. As it happened in my case, I had gotten involved in politics and got invited to a meeting down in Austin, Texas. I lived in Dallas, and I got a call in the emergency department one day from a guy who I didn't know and said, "Hey, look, Kneeland, I'm going to this meeting in Austin that you're supposed to be going to. Why don't we just go together?" And I was like, "Sure, what Southwest Airlines flight, American Airlines flight are you on?" And he said, "Well, no, I've got my own jet, so you should just come fly with me." And I got on the jet and said, I'm in the wrong business. I'm sorry. What is it you do? I just had never been exposed to the business world. I had, all I knew was doctor, lawyer, teacher, preacher. And medicine to me was the highest calling. I life was good. Things were great. I was happy, but that opened a window into a whole nother world. And so it's one that I had to challenge myself to explore, because one of the biggest obstacles I find with regard to people achieving other things is the inertia of their success.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that, it's so easy to keep doing what you're doing because you're good at it, you're getting paid well for it. Life is great. And for me, my biggest challenge was confronting myself and saying, yes, things are great now, life is good, but you can do more. You should challenge yourself to do more, and forcing myself out of my comfort zone into, in this case, serving on the board of Texas Teachers, because I couldn't afford to go back, get an MBA, work on Wall Street. I said, let me get next to money. That exposed me to public equities, fixed income, real estate, and ultimately, alternative investments, private equity. And I said, wow, that's compelling. But how do you get there? To your point, Bob, I knew I needed great mentors, people who could advise and counsel me. I needed a great team, but also I felt credibility outside of medicine. I didn't want people to just think of me as a doctor. And so on the mentorship side, as I read more and more about finance, there was a gentleman in Texas by the name of Richard Rainwater, who was a legendary investor. And while most people don't know him now, he came out of a high net worth family called the Bass family. But a lot of folks have heard of his biggest trade. And his biggest trade was buying a raw piece of land in a place no one had ever heard of for $20 million back in the 60s. And he ultimately aggregated it and flipped it to the Walt Disney Company. It was in Orlando, Florida, and it was from 20 million to 12 billion, became Disney World. And so Richard became a great mentor, great friend. Again, this was not someone who I knew, but I happened to see him at an event in Dallas, and I just, it was 1,000 people in the room, and I just ran up to him and said, Mr. Rainwater, I want to be like you when I grow up. And he said, well, come by and see me. Mm-hmm. And I went by and saw him, and he opened the world up to me in terms of introducing me to different people. And what it did for me was give me confidence. It said to me, if this man who is that successful is introducing me to all these people, he believes this is something I could do. And then after that was David Bonderman, who founded TPG. David became a great mentor, great friend, but also wrote a check, said, look, I'll invest with you. I'll invest with you. I'll put some money up. And then later, Mike Milken became a great mentor, great friend, also an investor as well. And these folks have been extraordinary mentors, friends, and people who I love, and have been tremendous influences on me and my life and family.
Kneeland, I want you to take it a little bit deeper than that, because I've been in this business a long time, and young people always ask me about networking. Does NAIC have networking events? And they tend to start off by talking about it in this very transactional way. I need to network because I need to find people that will invest in my fund and do this and do that. They aren't really looking for new family members. They aren't really looking for godparents and people that, are going to, do more than this just principal thing. Take us a little bit deeper. How do you get to that deeper level of frankly opening yourself, making yourself vulnerable, giving of yourself, receiving from others, to have that deeper networking experience that would cause you to call somebody to be your child's godparent, or like you said, be your best friends, right? Because I know you don't do this as a casual thing. You don't do it necessarily as a working thing. It is a part of who you are. Talk a little bit more about that.
In my case, I really take the long view of these relationships, not, to your point, transactional. And I also view it, even in people who were my mentors, how do I help them? What are some unique ways that they would not expect me to be able to assist them on. And so very much trying to make it not necessarily an equal relationship, but one in which I'm trying to be thoughtful about their needs and speaking to them in ways that maybe other people don't. And being a physician, I'm comfortable talking about life and death, people's health, their kids, substance abuse, whatever that is. I'm comfortable in that world. Can I get a referral to you with regard to this health challenge or that situation? Because as you're also aware, Bob, I've been involved in politics a bit. And so maybe that's some way I can be helpful to these people. They hadn't thought of it. For me, it's always been important that I grow, or that I'm beyond what people's expectations are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm beyond what their impression, their cookie cutter thinking of who I am.
You don't let them define you.
Correct. And so the ability to be able to say to someone who's a very successful billionaire, private equity, yes, I can make that phone call for you that you can't make for yourself.
Right.
And so I have tried to put myself in positions where I can not only, learn from these people, but also I can give. Mm-hmm. And certainly serving on the board of Texas Teachers presented an extraordinary opportunity to network and meet a lot of people. And I served on the board of the Dallas Employee Retirement System and the Dallas Police and Fireman System, Fire and Police Pension Fund. So those three funds. So it gave me an understanding of the LP mentality, but it also allowed me to be able to introduce people who in that space might have an interest in those respective relationships that they wouldn't have thought otherwise that I had access to. So again, among the people who I mentioned, certainly as it relates to David Vonderman and Mike Milk and even Richard Rainwater, I wrote an article in Fortune magazine entitled From Mentorship to Friendship to Love, and the arc of those relationships. These individuals, Richard has passed now, but David is one of my, and maybe my closest friend. I mean, and again, this is a guy with enormous success, but we connected in humanity and in a love for each other and a vulnerability on both sides that allows us to be able to grow. So I don't think of him as this titan of industry, which indeed he is, but he's my friend. He is my friend. And if he needs anything, and oftentimes he does, he will call me first. And vice versa.
There is an observation. I attempt to learn something from all of our members, but the one thing I learned from you is the power of this simple question you've asked me many times, and I've heard you ask many others. Is there any way I can help you? Mm-hmm. Talk about that question, Kneeland, and talk about where it came from, because I suspect it came from your lineage. But talk to me a little bit about that and how that has become such an integral part of who you are as a man.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was incredibly blessed to have wonderful parents. I have 4 brothers, 2 sisters. Both my parents were quite educated. Both finished high school at 15. Both finished college at 19. Both went grad school. Both of my grandparents finished college in the 1920s. My grandfather finished medical school in 1930. He went to medical school because his uncle, his father's brother, was an MD. So I've had an extraordinary lineage of education, but also of responsibility and exposure. And, in my case, it really has been such an extraordinary blessing that allowed me to challenge myself. In the case of being able to leave medicine, I don't know that I could have left medicine if I in this case, looked at my grandfather and said, that was an accomplishment to leave medicine, to go into medicine in finish medical school in 1930. Well, I did it, finished med school in 1982. Maybe it's not such a big deal. I mean, that lineage, really raised the bar for me. And to your point, I've always viewed my success as I've kind of built the success that I have on the ability to help other people. And part of it is, spiritual or karma, just kind of how I believe. But also it's where I get the greatest joy. And Dr. King said, anyone can lead because anyone can serve. Anyone can serve others. And so, the different ways that I have, I think, been viewed and respected by people is the fact that I'm just not out for myself. I genuinely am trying to help not just myself, but I'm trying to help others because, I don't believe in, that this idea of if I succeed, then that means you won't succeed. I think that it's not a zero-sum game. And I think the more people I can help to be successful, the more success accrues to me. That's just philosophically. And so, look, I'm competitive. I want to win. I want to do well. But the fact that someone else is doing well, I'm not threatened by that. In fact, I love that. And one of the joys of the NAIC and your leadership, Bob, is the fact you brought together these extraordinary, talented men and women, particularly of color, who have succeeded in so many different ways. And for me, it's motivating. It's inspiring. And, it makes me want to not only do well for myself, but to help others.
That's outstanding. So there are many facets to you, and so we're compartmentalizing these and going through a number of them. But you spend a lot of time focused not just on Texas, not just on the United States, but truly a global citizen, a global businessman. It's not hard for me to catch you out of the country. In China or on some other journey. Let's talk a little bit about your international perspective. I know that you're a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and that you've had extensive travels, but talk a little bit about what being a person with a global mindset has meant to you as a person and also as a professional.
Yeah, I was very fortunate that as a 14-year-old, I got involved in politics, believe it or not. I got to skip part of a year of school here in Texas and serve in the Texas legislature as a page. And so that really exposed me to politics at a young age. And then 16, having never been out of Texas, was an exchange student to Greece. And so I go from Galena Park, Texas, which is a Friday night lights town, one high school in Texas, and I go to Thessaloniki, Greece. And Greece at the time is under military dictatorship, and my friends are anarchists and communists and left and right and hate the United States. I thought everybody loved America. And they were like, no. Apparently the CIA supposedly had overthrown the government of Greece, put it in a military dictatorship, and my friends were all hating on America. But they were all trying to get a green card to get to America.
Right.
I was like, oh, so it's like that. And what it did was give me insight into the immigrant mentality. If you're coming over a boat from Vietnam or potato famine in Ireland or war in Ukraine, you get to the U.S., things are challenging, it's tough, but you have a face that says, oh my God, it could be so much worse. For most Blacks in America, because of slavery, they don't have a frame of reference. And so that experience in Greece provided me a frame of reference when my freedom of speech was curtailed, when my ability to assemble was curtailed, all of those things. And I said, you know what? The U.S. has got to share challenges, no question, but it is a land of opportunity, and I need to take advantage of it. So again, from there, you know, my exposure to politics only increased. You know, I spent a year in Europe while I was at Princeton, in Sweden and England, traveling over Western Europe, Eastern Europe, but also, again, as a senior, being involved in the anti-apartheid movement, 60 plus days of protest, taking over the administration building. And then, quite frankly, when I was in med school, spending my electives in the Middle East, in Egypt, Israel, Jordan, looking at infectious disease and surgery, but also involved in, look, when I just before I got there, Nasser gets not Assassin, but Sadat gets assassinated.
Yep, Anwar Sadat.
Anwar Sadat gets assassinated in Egypt. So it just heightens the political tension and whatever, but learned a lot. And so politics has always been something that I have been involved in, again, including what I'd observed as a 14-year-old was, while money was the driver of politics, and women and people of color had been more involved in grassroots politics, not on the money side. And so with friends, I began to raise money for the, senator in New Jersey, Bill Bradley, who I'd met, did an extraordinary fundraiser for him. And then that was successful. He became godfather of one of my kids. Then Ann Richards called me, asked me to help her raise money for her campaign. She became governor. Then Carol Moseley Braun, John Rogers introduced me to her, and he had supported me with Bill Bradley and Richards, and so hosted thing for her. And then Ron Brown asked me to help Bill Clinton, and so became this snowball of activity, all the while practicing medicine. And again, the question that was asked of me at the time was, if the president of the United States walks in the room, this was Bill Bradley, what's your ask? I was like, what do you mean? He said exactly what I said. If the president of the United States walks in the room, what's your ask? He said, don't just be happy to be in the room. Mm-hmm. Don't be caught up in the lights, the cameras, all that. If you're in a room with the president, you're there for a reason. They know what they want out of you. You should know what you want out of them. Be prepared. Wow. And that insight was so fundamental, just that simple thing, to being prepared to know what to ask for when opportunity presented itself. And so I wound up on the board of, and on that plane ride, mm-hmm. because I knew what to ask for. Lots of different opportunities, whether it's serving on the board of Starwood Hotels because I needed a place to stay, at American Airlines because I need to be able to fly for free, or Gap because I got 6 kids, or Burger King was food. I mean, putting together a portfolio of companies that would allow me to be able to mitigate my risk at the same time, allow me to be able to function as I built the firm was enormously important.
So let's go into the announcement. And it's been announced now, it's cleared. So we're not breaking news here, but we are going to share it to this audience to the point of knowing what to ask for, right? You recently, I saw, got appointed to something by someone, and it's not a straight line. It's classic Kneeland Youngblood. It's again, not linear for what we see above the surface, right? But it does fall into place with, I know how you plan and how you prepare yourself and how you connect yourself. Why don't you let the audience know what I'm talking about that recently happened in your life?
Yeah. So it was announced, again, it's public information, that I was appointed to the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. So this is announcement. President Biden has appointed me to the President's Intelligence Board, which is a board that advises the president on intelligence, national security issues affecting the country, but it's a direct line to the White House. Again, first off, it's an honor, and I'm privileged to be able to.
Congratulations.
To serve the country. It's not a full-time job, but it certainly is a board that I will be spending a tremendous amount of time on. But I had first come across this board actually in the Clinton administration, when someone we all, or most of us knew, Vernon Jordan, extraordinary civil rights leader, corporate board member, attorney. Vernon was very close to Bill Clinton, very, very close to Bill Clinton, and he could have had anything he wanted. And I read Vernon Jordan to be nominated to the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. It's like, oh, what is that? Now again, as it happened, I think he ultimately decided not to do it. And fast forward, George W. Bush gets elected president. The chairman of his National Finance Committee, it's a guy named Ray Hunt, multi-billionaire. I see he gets appointed to President's Intelligence Advisory Board. That's interesting. Don Evans, who was George W. Bush's best friend, who was Secretary of Commerce in the first term. Mm-hmm. When he retires, he gets appointed to the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. Well, it didn't take long for me to figure that there's something going on here that I want to be a part of, because that's where, decisions are being made. And it's probably a place where we aren't necessarily privileged to have a lot of representation. And so I supported President Biden in the campaign. And when they said, what do you want? You want to be an ambassador, this, you can do this. I said, this is what I want. And they were like, wow, okay, so you are serious. And I talked to Adam Schiff yesterday, who was, formerly the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. And he said, congratulations, this is the most coveted spot in the administration. So again, knowing what to ask for. But it's also what I enjoy. It's also what I enjoy. And knowledge, if you understand it, and know how to use it, is power. And we need people at those tables.
Well, congratulations to you on that, Kneeland. When I heard about it, I was extremely proud of you and excited for you. Let's shift the conversation a little bit. We've talked about your upbringing a little bit. We've talked about your accolades academically and your achievements academically. We've talked about medicine, business. You mentioned some of your boards, which I think, if I count, there were over 5 Fortune 100 boards that you were on. Just pinnacle at every step in every endeavor. And to no surprise, you consider, as you've told me many times, your greatest accomplishment to be your family life, right? So talk to us a little bit about your family, what they have achieved, particularly your wife and your children, and what it takes to, frankly, travel the globe and do all of these significant things, and yet have, a partner that can help you raise a family that can achieve so much.
Yeah. I've been incredibly blessed. And again, if you can, I would just encourage everyone to try to find a great partner in your life, somebody who you love, who loves you, and who you can build a life together. I was blessed. My wife, went to Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, HBCU, and got her PhD in molecular genetics from MIT. And we met when I was in med school. She was doing her postdoctorate, and we fell in love, and we were I was incredibly blessed to have a partner who was very complimentary to me. We've only been married 38 years now, but certainly the life we've built, and principally our kids. I have 6 kids. One's in London, one's in Silicon Valley, one's in LA, one's in New York, one's in New Haven, one's in Nashville, but they're all very different. Again, a couple went to Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Yale, who are accomplished in their own right, but also love each other, get along well with each other, and are striving for success in their own ways. My son's a singer songwriter. Again, he went to Yale. He speaks fluent Danish as well as Russian now and Japanese. Again, my daughter, who's in Silicon Valley, Harvard, Rockefeller Scholar, speaks Arabic, Japanese, German, Spanish, Stanford Business School, joint degree at Hopkins in Middle East Studies. Again, they're all doing, one went to Princeton's in gaming, one's been in Wall Street at Lehman before that blew up, then Morgan Stanley, then BlackRock. Again, one went to Stanford undergrad, one's at Yale now in grad school. They're all making their way in different ways, from songwriting to one in strategy, was at BCG and now at Pepsi. One that, again, when it's in grad school in design. It's what I'm most proud of because they love each other. They love me and their mom. And, we built a wonderful family together. And there's nothing that comes close to the joy I feel from what I've accomplished or we've accomplished together, building and raising a great family.
Take me one level down, and I'm not going to take you too personal on this, but I want to understand process and techniques. Mm-hmm. Take me one level down, whether it's how the Youngbloods talk to each other at the dinner table, how you instill competition and excellence without the negative aspects of it, right? Give us a kernel or an insight into the Youngblood family's approach that has generated outcomes and the development of these fine young people.
Well, fortunately, there are several aspects of that. One is we've tried to expose them to the world. When my kids were really young, the very first vacation we ever went on was, of course, Martha's Vineyard. We're all going to Martha's Vineyard. They're all, the Black Mecca, and everybody's arguing. These kids are all young, and I don't want to do this, and I would do that. So we basically said, you know what? From now on, we're never going to tell you where you're going on a holiday. We're never going to tell you where you're going on vacation because we don't want this argument. And this became this adventure every summer. And as it happened, look, I was fortunate. Because I was, on a board at American Airlines, free first class travel anywhere in the world, American flew. I was on the board of Starwood Hotels. I got the hotel hookup. So we'd go to Russia, China, Japan, Brazil, Argentina, London, Paris, all over the world every summer. And that was important in terms of exposing them to the world. South Africa, Egypt, Cuba, whatever. They've been there. And so that made them comfortable with the world, which is why, languages is something that they've, most of them have adopted. I would also say you can't outsource. It's difficult, let me just say this, to outsource raising your kids. And what I mean by that is you have to be engaged, I think, in their development, both in school, but outside of school. And in doing so, particularly in school, look, your kids may go to a great school or maybe not so great school, but you have to be engaged, and you can't assume the teacher has the same expectations you have of your kids. Mm-hmm. And so being involved in a way that they understand what your expectations are for your kids, I think is enormously important. Also, holding kids accountable. I'm as my wife likes to say, I'm not your best friend. I'm your mom. And so she made that very clear. Maybe some other parent, they got that. No, that's not me. I'm not your best friend. I'm your mom, and you're gonna get this done. You're gonna get this homework done. You're gonna, and so having, respect, mm-hmm. and kind of understanding kids, trying to meet them at their level, but at the same time, making sure there's this delineation of who's in charge, and what your expectations of them. And look, we did some things that certainly weren't conventional. You know, for the most part, every summer my kids were, after 2 weeks, they were getting tutored. Math, science, languages, whatever. I mean, but they were all there together, so it made it more of a community. We had tutors in; they were all doing different things, and it made more of a community. And we also never had cable TV. My kids didn't have cable, which is crazy. I know. I mean, we ended up one year going to Disney World, and my kids were like, okay, let's go to Disney World. And they were like, they didn't want to leave the hotel room because SpongeBob SquarePants was on. They were like, oh my God, this is amazing. I mean, they would take it. But again, look, all of this, it worked out, but again, life is a journey, not a destination. And we're blessed today, right here, right now. You never know what tomorrow will bring, but so far it has been extraordinary, for me in terms of my greatest fulfillment.
Well, congratulations to you and your wife. And it's an important part of this platform to really show the 360-degree view of people. And with you and with most people, you have to talk about the family component of that, because it is actually, of all of this, it's the only thing that you've done all of the years, right? All 67 years, right? So appreciate you sharing that. I want to touch on two more topics before we close. One topic I want to talk about is this crazy world of chasing capital, right? You live it, I live it, all of our friends in this business live it. Talk to us a little bit, Kneeland, about the challenge of doing that while also attempting to grow and develop a business, because you've worked this aspect of your business very hard. You have produced fruit, but I know it hasn't been easy either. So talk a little bit about the whole capital raising, capital formation side of the business.
Look, it's a challenge, and part of that's on us. Meaning, when we were starting out, we didn't have particularly good performance. We didn't, we were trying to figure it out. I was trying, and once we kind of honed in healthcare, that's made it much better. So some of that's our own personal responsibility, but there are barriers in this business, be it gatekeepers, consultants. There are, an existing infrastructure of much larger firms with better brand names, that it's easier for institutional investors to simply check that box as opposed to taking risk on a newer manager. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of no's in this business. You just have to be prepared for it. And in my case, look, I've had people tell me no my whole life. I also, had 6 kids that, were highly motivating for me to make sure that I was able to pay those private school tuitions and all those colleges and all the rest. And so when I thought about, potentially giving up, all I had to do was look at a picture of them, and I was back on a plane. But look, it's not easy. But again, in my world, no means not yet. Mm-hmm. And so that's the attitude that I've taken. I've had disappointment, but also you get upside surprise on people and on things. And then, necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. You begin to figure out, okay, well, look, if I can't get it this way, maybe I'll get it that way. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I have done. I have hustled, and it's allowed me now to be in this business for 20 years, provide, a good life to my family, but also the best is yet to come, in my opinion. I've reinvested and reinvested and reinvested in my business to the point that I think the best is yet to come.
So I took particular note over the last year, right? I follow Pharaohs, that. We've been friends a long time, but the last year has been extraordinary at Pharaohs in terms of the deals exited, the money generated. Now, the SEC won't allow us to talk about those things, and so I'm not going to put you in that situation.
Mhm.
But what can you tell us about the momentum that Pharos has achieved recently, and what are some of the things that have been outcomes for the firm?
What I can say, it's consistent a little bit with what we've talked about before. I've taken a long-term view, and that's not to say it hasn't been frustrating, but keep in mind, again, the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, that was 14 years ago when I first said, that's something, it's taking a while to get there. But, when I applied to a country club in Dallas, not that I golf or play tennis, it took me 13 years to get admitted to be the first Black member. So I'm a reasonably persistent, never going to give up kind of person. And, what I would say is that, look, I've been helped by taking a long view. Having said that, it's important to be patient, but I'm not, I'm always pushing. I'm always pushing. I'm not laying back, waiting. And I think that attitude is something that has been an important in terms of not only mine, but the firm's success. And so in our particular case, there was a series of things that finally manifested itself. One was on us saying, we're going to stick to what we do best, which is healthcare, number one. Number two is, guess what? There was a pandemic. Oh, all of a sudden, healthcare becomes a lot more important. And so staying in the game, and in doing so, we had kind of perfected our models of care that allowed us to be able to exit and return over the past year and a half. I think I can say this, 1.5x of the fund, in 12 months or so, and be on a trajectory, to do much better, not only within that fund, but also that has allowed the market to say, okay, this is what he said he would do. This is what he's done. And we can have faith, that it's, that we can back it. So it's taken a while, but, it is what it is. And we're getting there.
Well, you didn't say anything. Thank you for the answer. You didn't say anything that would get either of us in trouble, but I'm extremely proud of what I have read and what you have shared with me that you all have achieved. And I know from hearing from them that your investors have been very impressed with the realizations and what you have delivered back to them, fulfilling the promises that you made. So congratulations to you, your partners, and the team on that.
Thank you.
Where I'd like to go for our final piece, Kneeland, is you have, through all the great stories and all the many firsts, and you have given us a lot of nuggets, right? Persistence is clearly one, right? High purpose is another. Treating people fairly with respect and dignity is a third. But those are things that I can sort of glean from your answers. But I actually want to give you the opportunity to decode it for us. What advice do you have for future generations of young people who are aspiring to do things and achieve significance in this world? What advice do you have?
My advice is first and foremost, know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Second off, be true to yourself. Third off, again, the golden rule, treat others as you'd like to be treated. I would also say that do and be your very best. Do and be your very best.
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted to look back. I had the fortune, which I'd mentioned, of spending time in Egypt. And I would, at apartment on the Nile, pyramids in the background, it was an extraordinary time. And I would go out to the desert, Sahara Desert, and look at these extraordinary monuments, the pyramids, and built 5,000 years before Christ. And it makes you feel so small. And what I did was say, look, at the end of my life, because I was out there meditating, at the end of my life, when I'm dying, when I'm taking my last breath, who is it I want to be? What is it I want to define me? What is it I want, my legacy to be? And then maybe I can reverse engineer to get to that point by the decisions I make moving forward. And so at critical points in time in my life, be it, leaving medical school or practicing emergency, different things, I go back to that time that I had and saying, when I'm taking my last breath, what's going to define me? And so, my advice is to try to understand your purpose. Try to understand your purpose. And in understanding your purpose, then make the decisions necessary, as challenging as difficult they might be, to be that which you are here for.
That's outstanding. So know yourself, be true to yourself, treat others with respect, and be your best. And when it's all said and done, as you focus on your legacy, do the things it takes to do the things it takes. Have the courage that it takes to be who you have strived to be. That's brilliant, man. Well, look, my friend, I thank you for sharing this precious hour with me, for giving us deeper insights into who you are and how you've invested your time, talent, and treasure. I look forward to the many things that there are to come, and continue to respect and appreciate all that you've done.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Bob.
Thank you, Kneeland. Be
All right.
well, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.